So, you want to write an immortal. What's crack-a-lack, literary geeks? Happy Tuesday. We're having another freak heat wave over here in Vancouver, and it's still much too warm to be wearing the blouse that I'm wearing, but it's practically spooky season, and I feel dramatic. Plus, I feel like this is thematically appropriate in an Immortals video, because you know vampires are coming up at some point. This video was actually inspired by a video that I've watched on another channel. One of my favorite channels is Overly Sarcastic Productions, or OSP, where your hosts, Red and Blue, go over various myths, legends, tropes, diving both into classic literature and the new ways that media presents stories. I highly recommend their channel and we'll leave it linked down below. Red recently had a trope talk video where she talked about immortals, and that just sparked something deep inside my mind palace, especially since I've been seeing a lot more videos recently kind of ragging on fairy lore and then the resurgence of the vampire trope and genre that, like, I'm not mad at, but like I get why people are kind of annoyed at it and why nowadays we are able to kind of look at it at a little bit more of a critical angle and dissect some things that are like maybe a little bit of a red flag nowadays. So in today's video I'm going to go over some of those issues that are brought up when talking about immortal characters and some things you might want to think about when you're writing an immortal character and how those all come together in a YA book. First of all, you have to figure out what kind of immortal your immortal is. You have two types. Number one is the kind that has always been immortal. This is going to be like a fairy lord or a god. And number two is the being that used to be human but became immortal. So you're talking your vampires, your superheroes, your people under ancient curses. And depending on what you want to write or what kind of story you're telling, these two immortals are going to tell their stories very differently. There's going to be a swaying moral compass because who knows how long these people have lived and who knows what they've seen and who knows what they find important anymore. If you're a god, why do you care about these mortals running around with their, you know, lactose intolerance and like inability to build bridges properly? Like, you don't care. Or what's it gonna look like if you became an immortal and you're constantly watching friends and family around you grow old and knowing that you're never gonna be able to do that yourself? Basically, if they started human, they're gonna be having an existential crisis at all times. But if they never were human and they're interacting with humans or other mortal beings, you have to give them a reason to care enough about those said beings. I know a lot of people just want to write the sexy vampire, the sexy fairy, or the sexy fallen angel that suddenly appears and falls in love with your protagonist, but if you are some kind of immortal person or being, you're not gonna fall in love or become human or gain an emotional intelligence within like 10 minutes of meeting your main character, like I see in a lot of these books. So you're telling me some god's been in another dimension being like, I don't care about any of these people, until one day a human they thought was kind of cute went, humans are important. They were like, oh, you know what? I totally respect all of humanity now. Like, I doubt it. Now, of course, it's totally okay if you want to write a character like this or you enjoy reading characters like this, because come on, it's fantasy. Everything's fantastical, everybody's hot, everyone has great mental states, like I get it. But if you want to dive a little deeper, maybe add some nuance, if your character is 300 years old, they are not going to experience life like your perky 16-year-old protagonist. Some immortal characters that I've seen are just totally normal people that get all the references to everything and act like a normal 2000s teenager, and then every once in a while make a thing about like how, oh yeah, World War II was super wild. But here's where we get existential. If you're writing a character like that, that's not going to be how they act. If you live for hundreds of years, you are not going to be the same. And it doesn't matter if you've experienced war, you saw civilizations being built and destroyed, you're just not gonna be the same. You will see people that you love and care for die over and over again. You might see cities being built or cities being destroyed. You might go through multiple wars. You'll likely have to fake your death over and over again to make sure that nobody ever spies you, never aging. You're gonna constantly be on the run and be scared of forming attachments to people. Like, you will have issues. Your character's probably gonna have PTSD about more regular things, and instead of having them fight in every war ever, they're probably gonna have PTSD about smaller things, like never wanting to form attachments to people or constantly having to move and make friends and redo your whole life over and over again every few decades, and like, that's gonna mess some people up, and that's sad. Also, I really doubt your immortal character has been around the world and been in every war and seen every country ever. Like, I hardly ever leave my house. Do you think if I was immortal I would do anything differently? Like, every couple decades maybe I like go travel the world a little bit and like see what's changed and like what countries still exist, but like other than that, I would stay in my house, have books delivered to me, and that's the way I would spend my eternity. Like, I would spend my eternity finally frickin' finishing my TBR pile. Let me have a sip of water before we go to the most controversial point of this whole video. In terms of writing YA with immortal beings, likely love interests. I think this is brought up again with the whole Midnight Sun resurgence, but the age-old debate on if you have a 300-year-old vampire falling in love with a 16-year-old girl, if you look at it like that, it's like a little creepy. I feel like the most important question is, why does your 300-year-old vampire character find the 16-year-old attractive? She is a child to them. You see where I'm going with this? I also see a lot of plots where the immortal being is going through high school over and over again, has to like fit in. But here's where I really want to ask the question. I definitely would not want to redo my high school experience over and over again. Why don't you go to university? You can live in a dorm 24/7, no one will bother you. People going to universities are anywhere from like 15 if you're like a prodigy, up to like in their 50s and 60s. Like, why are you in high school learning about mitosis for the 800th time? It's so boring. Go to university and like get a 7th PhD. You could just go to school and be like, oh no, I'm actually 25, I just have a big baby face, and everyone would be like, oh, okay, that tracks. If you're gonna write an immortal character in a high school setting, you have to give them a reason to go to that high school, be it the main character or destiny or whatever else. Because why would you stay in a town for 4 years to do high school when you could just like not. People take like 10 years in their college degrees. Just go to a different college every couple decades. I see absolutely no issues here. Where like in high school you got edgy e-girls and, you know, Gen Zers with their cell phones, and they would figure out that you're a vampire in like 20 minutes. Actually, it would be really interesting if you had your 16, 17-year-old protagonist fall in love with this immortal, and then that's a whole dynamic as it is, because they would be like, I see you as like a child, that's weird, but it would be like a really cool tension point to be like, oh, but you look so young, but you're actually not, and like having them realize that they're actually really old and experienced, and then like having a internal struggle of being attracted to that person, or like having the other person be like a mentor figure. And you see where I'm going with this? Like, there's so many things you could do. So once again, I will link the OSP video in the description box because it's a very thorough look into the Immortals trope. But these are just a couple things that are kind of going through my mind when I'm reading about these immortal creatures, or how there's a new rise in vampire books, and I'm like, oh boy. Please make your characters 18 at least. That was actually something I really liked in City of Bones. Spoiler alert for something that's been out for like more than a decade. But Simon gets turned into a vampire at 16, and then it just keeps going on with a normal timeline, so he's only been a vampire for like 3 months, and he's like, it's not weird yet, but like, it's also really weird. But like, this sucks. Like, I can't go into a bar for my entire eternity. And people think that I'm like old and wise, but like, I've only been a vampire for 3 months, like I'm actually 16. Like, yes, this is the kind of real life experience I want to talk about. Or dare I say, in A Court of Thorns and Roses, where Rysand, I say it Rysand, is it Rysand? I don't know, it's Rysand. He's been taken advantage of and kind of locked away and like not knowing what time is for a really long time. But then when he meets Feyre, she's a tether that kind of reinstates his humanity. And I actually felt like that part of that series was done quite well. She is mature, he's a little immature, but like, they both are going for the same thing, and like they're building each other up, but it's not like super weird that he's like, who knows how old, and she's like 19. Not that I'm endorsing any ridiculous age gap relationships, alright? You can change what your age range is on Tinder as far as you want, but just like, here's some things to think about when you're writing a book about an immortal fairy character. I feel like there's so much more nuance and subplot and character tension and development that come out of an immortal character, but most people kind of shove it to the wayside to just write this like sexy 500-year-old fairy lord. And again, nothing wrong with that, because I love me some 500-year-old sexy fairy lords, but at the same time, I'm like, you got a whole lot to work with here. So, you know, let's like pull some historical events and work with it. Make sure to join us at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time here on Sunday for our live chat, and I hope to see you guys all there. Happy reading and happy writing. Bye!